Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're taking a trip to a kind of spooky destination, the Iron Graveyard. We're gonna dig up 5 of the absolute worst exercises you might currently be doing in the gym right now and explain exactly why you need to stop doing them immediately. We're putting these super popular movements under the microscope to uncover the hidden dangers they pose to your joints and muscles.
Now you might be wondering, could one single bad rep actually end your fitness journey? Well, yeah, literally. Whether you're a professional athlete, like a pitcher throwing fastballs all day, or just an everyday lifter trying to build some aesthetic muscle, a single bad repetition under a sudden overload can cause a massive tear. It can sideline you for good. The stakes are incredibly high, and honestly, it's just not worth rolling the dice.
So how do we judge this stuff objectively? We'll be using a specific lens today, the exact same lens used by professional physical therapists at elite strength coaches. We're looking at the risk to benefit ratio. Basically, we're constantly asking, are the potential gains of this movement actually worth the physical hazards it places on your body? If the risk is high and there are better, safer options out there, well, that exercise belongs in the ground. Here's our roadmap for today. 1. The Iron Graveyard. 2. The pecs and shoulders. 3. The upright row trap. 4. Lower body liabilities. And finally, 5. Low risk, high reward. Okay, let's dive into this with section 1. The Iron Graveyard and the anatomy of a bad choice.
Moving right along to section 2, pecs and shoulders. Specifically, we're looking at chest flies and the behind the neck press.
Now, this first one completely busts a massive gym myth. People think the big benefit of the chest fly is that opening your arms super wide gives your pecs this incredible stretch. But anatomy says otherwise. It's just not true. If you actually trace the origin and insertion of your chest muscles, they attach right over onto your upper arm. Once you reach the bottom position of a standard bench press, your chest is fully stretched out. Going any wider doesn't stretch the chest more, it stretches a totally different muscle called the coracobrachialis. Opening up that lever arm with heavy loads, it creates a massive, massive risk for a torn pec. So what's the fix? If you really want that deep chest squeeze, that adduction, there's a way better, much safer option. Just get on your feet and hit a 3D cable crossover. This lets you safely target the chest from a functional standing position without forcing your shoulder and pec tendon into some dangerous over-leveraged stretch. That brings us to our next resident of the graveyard, the behind the neck shoulder press. Seriously, we gotta ask ourselves, why on earth would we purposely push a heavy barbell in a totally unnatural plane of motion? Getting weight overhead is already tough on the shoulders, right? But the specific path that weight travels makes all the difference in the world between building muscle and just destroying your joint. Let's look at the glenohumeral joint, your shoulder joint. It's a ball and socket, sure, but the socket actually points a little forward, not straight out to the side. So your natural plane of motion is slightly ahead of your body. When you force your arms straight out to the side to press behind your neck, the ball physically hits the rounded lateral edge of the socket as it rolls up. This unnatural friction causes immediate and severe joint impingement. Ouch. Luckily, fixing this is a super simple 3-step process. First off, bring those elbows slightly in front of your body. Get back into that natural forward plane. Second, when you press from there, you create a healthy balance between your upper traps pulling up and your serratus anterior pulling down. Third, this muscular balance naturally tips your shoulder blade backward, giving your joint maximum breathing room so the bones don't just grind together.
All right, section 3, the upright row trap and how it's provoking shoulder pain. Imagine walking into a physical therapy clinic, right? And the therapist wants to test you for shoulder impingement. They'd put you in a very specific position. They'd pull your hands down and force your elbows up. Sound familiar? Yeah, that is the exact literal posture of an upright row. The weight pulls your hands down while you force your elbows up. It brilliantly illustrates a clinical impingement provocative test. It doesn't even matter how wide you grip the bar. The core mechanics are fundamentally flawed. There's a quote from the source material that absolutely hits the nail on the head here. We don't want to be doing clinical provocative tests on a rep-by-rep basis. You might be thinking, hey, I've done upright rows for years without pain. But remember that risk to benefit ratio. Consistent overuse in this highly compromised position is basically begging for structural breakdown over time. Let's shift gears to section 4, lower body liabilities, good mornings and leg extinctions. First up on the lower body chopping block is the good morning. Now, the irony here is that the basic hip hinge pattern is actually an awesome movement. The problem is modern life. To do a good morning safely, you need near-perfect thoracic extension, meaning you have to keep your mid and upper back totally straight under a heavy load. But because we all sit hunched over desk jobs all day, our natural thoracic mobility is completely ruined. So what happens when you try this without that required mid-back mobility? A pretty terrifying chain reaction, honestly. Because your mid-back can't absorb and distribute the load properly, all that heavy forward-leaning force bypasses the mid-back and drops straight into the most vulnerable area of your body, your lower back. There are just way safer ways to strengthen your posterior chain without wrecking your spine. And that brings us to the ultimate lower body resident of the iron graveyard, the leg extension. Or honestly, let's call it what it really is, the leg extinction. This is a heavily flawed machine exercise posing extreme biomechanical risks to your knees, and it offers virtually zero functional, real-world benefit. Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer medical rap sheet mapped out against this machine. It's a nightmare. It places massive shearing force directly on the knee joint. It puts constant tension on your delicate ACL. It causes an unnatural muscle imbalance between your VMO and your rectus femoris, which almost always leads to patellar tendon issues. Plus, unlike natural walking or squatting, there is absolutely zero help from your hamstrings to stabilize the joint. Biomechanically, it's just a disaster.
Finally, Section 5, Low Risk, High Reward. Let's talk about putting science back in strength.
So, how do we stay out of the graveyard? It's simple. We choose closed chain functional movements. Closed chain basically just means your feet are firmly planted on the ground, engaging multiple muscle groups together to stabilize your joints, exactly like you do in everyday life. When you swap out isolated, unnatural machines for functional movements, you drop your injury risk way down while still getting all those high aesthetic and athletic rewards. And that brings us to the core takeaway from the explainer today. It's about putting that science back in strength. Even if you aren't paid to be a pro athlete, you should definitely train like one by prioritizing long-term joint health. You want to build strength that actually transfers to the real world. You want to be functionally strong for the game of life, not just for moving a pin on some dangerous machine. Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question. What other exercises belong in your personal iron graveyard? Take a really hard look at your routine this week. Are your exercises actually serving you, or are they just slowly breaking you down? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay safe out there, and I'll catch you next time.